But wait, before you slap on that DHT inhibitor or you pop that pill, you really need to listen to this. DHT is not your enemy. It is special ops. This is Back to the Barber, where scalp conditions are met and maintained. It's your host, AQBS, but most importantly, a fellow client. I hope all is well today, gents. The primary topic today is DHT is owed an apology. This is just a scapegoat, seconded by other relevant information and commentary. So let's get started. This DHT problem that you hear about so much. I'm talking about so much when it comes to male pattern balding. It's really the only thing you hear besides you need more circulation. Maybe third, they'll say something like nutrients and vitamins. But usually the circulation and nutrients and vitamins are something that people do to maintain or maximize hair. I always say that there's three things you're trying to do when it comes to men's hair. You're trying to maintain what you have, you're trying to maximize what you have, or you're trying to manufacture hair, right? When it comes to DHT, most people are trying to, I guess, really do all three of them. But really, DHT becomes the topic of conversation and the only thing you deal with when you are fearing that you're losing more hair, or you see the Hamilton-Norwood patterns go negative. You start at Norwood or Hamilton-Norwood 3, you look in the mirror and you starting to see 4 come over the horizon. And that's rough for many men. So DHT, this derivative of testosterone, is usually the culprit that everyone blames. Now, this DHT problem or subject is really 70, almost to 80% of how men are attempting to halt hair loss or restore what they've lost. Most of the time, when you're dealing with DHT, you're pretty much trying to maintain, maximize maybe. But when I think of maximize, I think that you are having an omega scalp. What's some omega scalp? Omega scalp doesn't have male pattern balding. It doesn't have woman pattern balding. It's a great hair. It's a great scalp. It's a rainforest. It's an oasis. It's not a desert. You know, it's not like the alpha scalp that's sensitive, that's weak, that doesn't produce great hair. The omega scalp really just needs to maximize what it has already, right? So therefore, when it comes to DHT, in most men, you're really trying to maintain because you see a problem occurring, or you want to make sure it doesn't get any worse, or you're attempting to try to manufacture. And to be honest with you, because the two myths of balding, it is inevitable and especially it is irreversible. Most men do not take DHT inhibitors in order to save themselves from, it's to save themselves from hair loss or receding more or balding more or thinning more. It is rarely, let me see if I can take this DHT inhibitor in order to regrow what I've lost. Most of even the human ingenuity products that exist, the lab-based solutions that exist, the pharmaceutical products that exist, when they're talking about DHT inhibiting, they are attempting to maintain what you have over the long haul by taking the pill, the powder, even the topical at times, and actually both a lot of times. So DHT inhibiting, and DHT is being the main factor in hair loss, because when you're omega, you're not even really dealing with DHT. Women really don't deal with the DHT inhibiting until they have problems, generally speaking, in menopause, when the hormones like estrogen, testosterone get off balance. They begin to experience hair loss. Then doctors a lot of times, or a dermatologist, will start trying to help them with the DHT quote unquote problem, right? Now, is DHT the culprit of hair loss? Yes. However, DHT is owed an apology because it is the scapegoat. Let me explain. This entire time I was creating Back to the Barber, one of the first things that I came across, obviously, is circulation, nutrition, vitamin, and then the DHT problem. And I did test on myself, and I don't want to really get into that. It's been almost 2 years. So I figured out from research of the human ingenuity products or lab-based solutions and herbs that worked. And when you really look at it, inhibiting DHT does seem to help stop hair loss. As a matter of fact, DHT and the prostate seems to be partners in this. Why do I say this? Because all of the human ingenuity products, especially the FDA approved one, right, that most people take the pill for inhibiting DHT, a lot of the best hair loss restoration products, especially ones of the major brands, these are or used to be prostate medicines. Get that? I try not to name brands, but just look up the FDA approved one that inhibits this, a DHT 5AR inhibitor. Look up the one that is supposed to be 5 times as strong as that's not FDA approved yet, and you will see that it too was a prostate inhibitor. So right off the bat, the same thing that inhibits the prostate from being enlarged, right, those problems, actually causes the hair to regrow back. And going to a second point, when men want to transition to a woman, the medicines they take or the hormonal therapies they take are suppressing testosterone, it's suppressing DHT, and it is increasing estrogen and all those woman-like hormones or female hormones. And they begin to transition from the way that their voice sounds, the way that their facial structure looks like, the amount of fat that the body holds on to, and even a lot of those guys began to regrow hair back. All of these clues led me to believe and led me to understand that the alpha scalp that I have, that men have when you are balding, is what I call prostate dominant. If it's prostate dominant, DHT is in the picture. Now, all these things I'm saying, it's almost like I'm going against the original subject topic, which was DHT is a scapegoat. Or, we should have an apology for it, because we don't really get down to why would DHT be in the scalp anyway. The irony about DHT is that it causes men to have the beard and have the facial hair. The irony about testosterone is that it grows hair. So you need a balance of it. So the same thing that puts most facial hair on a man turns around, and body hair, I should say, all the hair you have, and even in places that's kind of funny, like, your ears and nose and stuff like that, it is actually the cause of the hair loss on the scalp. And that has been something that scientists and researchers have been trying to figure out. And there are different theories for it. The theory that I am more comfortable with from my research and also from, going through this personally, right, is that the scalp is feminine. I actually had a previous video saying follicles are feminine. That's why they have their own immune privilege. That's why they have what I would call like babies, which are terminal hairs, right? And this is why they love subcutaneous fat. This is why they love suppleness, not hardness, not tension, not stress, right? Follicles get stressed out, aka acute follicle stress. They don't do a good job at producing hair. Rather, the follicle stress comes from traction. Rather, the follicle stress comes from a parasite problem or a fungus problem. Rather, the stress comes from DHT and an androgen problem. Rather, the stress comes from, let's just say, an immune problem. It doesn't matter. Whatever stress that becomes acute and chronic to the follicle, hair loss follows that. That's the general rule. This is why I say that male pattern balding doesn't exist the way that it doesn't exist to me the way it mostly exists to most people. And I don't think that androgenetic alopecia is a thing in that case. I truly believe that acute follicle stress causes hair loss. And several avenues or paths can lead to acute follicle stress. If you follow the path backwards, you will figure out the root cause of hair loss, which can be multiple things, okay? Now, getting to the original point, DHT is owed an apology because it is, in my humble opinion, helping. And I'm going to lay out how many ways and the type of ways that it's actually helping you to actually keep hair or to regrow it. First things first, have you ever noticed that bodybuilders seem to lose their hair eventually? Most of us will notice this. And it's usually the guys that are not, let's just say, the guy that works at the oil rig, or the fireman, or the guy that works on a farm. These guys don't normally just lose hair, right? Although if you look at them, they can be ripped, they can be strong, they can have an ideal masculine shape, but they don't necessarily have the severe hair loss of the bodybuilder. What's the difference? Well, the guy that works on the farm may work for 12-hour days, but he gets to rest. And every day, throwing hay in the back of a truck and raking whatever he's raking and dealing with the farm animals and picking up things on his shoulder and dragging things, that is much different than trying to attempt to pick up 250 pounds over and over again for an hour, 4 or 5 days a week. The guy that works on an oil rig and the fireman who's running up and down the ladders. So these guys have a healthy, very physical job that they do, and even athletes, right? But the bodybuilder, when you compare him to nature, it is extremely unnatural. Why? Because even when we were, let's just say, in caves or, in a savanna, yes, we were walking long distances. Yes, we were picking up things. Yes, we were foraging. Yes, we were picking and chopping and all these things. But nowhere would a guy just pick up a tree over and over and over again, right? It'd take one special guy to do that, right? It's probably where bodybuilding came from. However, the bulk of individuals would be cut, would have low body fat, probably less than 12%, right? And they will have, great cardio, great muscle tone, but they will not look like the bodybuilder. So how am I connecting this to DHT and hair loss? The reason why DHT is in the scalp or in the body in general in a absorbent amount is because the body has inflammation. So DHT is attempting to halt inflammation. It is attempting to help the body recover from what it feels it needs to recover from. Therefore, the more inflammation you have, the more overdoing the muscle you have, the more testosterone is converted into DHT, and the more that the DHT will be in your bloodstream, and eventually it will remove your hair. That's what I have came up with, my theory on balding, and it makes total sense for several reasons. I believe that 60 to 70% of all of the West, especially in the US, hair loss is coming from the gut. But what's coming through the gut is the fact that because of the toxins, the chemicals, because of the gut issues we have, when those things get into our blood system, one of the first things that happens is we begin to get inflamed in different areas. See, male pattern balding is always connected to prostate issues. It's connected to heart issues. It's connected to a lot of different issues we have as men, because balding is symbolic. I call it the omen. The omen means that it is pointing you to the fact that there is something very wrong with the balance of your body. It is not obvious a lot of times because you can look just fine, but inside, if the follicles that are organs are inflamed, then you could almost state that there is another follicle, another organ, if not all of them are having some issue. Therefore, you are more than likely 5 times more than likely to get or to have a heart attack than a man who is not balding. It's the omen. Therefore, DHT is not only probably attempting to fix the inflammation of the scalp, it is probably attempting to fix the inflammation of the heart. Therefore, men like bodybuilders who are constantly causing tension in the body, constantly causing tension in the muscles, constantly needing repair of the muscles, constantly inflaming themselves, right? Constant tears, constant micro tears, constant stress of the body causes DHT to accumulate. Therefore, when you see a male that has too much DHT in the scalp and we do some sort of DHT inhibiting, what we are doing is inhibiting DHT, but it is there because of inflammation. So what happens with the inflammation? It stays longer or it gets worse. This is the reason why a lot of the lab-based solutions and pharmaceuticals, shout out to even the pharmaceuticals and the companies attempting to help us with this problem, or these human ingenuity products, is because you can inhibit DHT, but if you're not stopping the root cause of why DHT is in the body the way that it is, then that same inflammation becomes worse in the follicles and they still fail eventually. You get it? Inhibiting what's trying to help with inflammation is not stopping inflammation. The inflammation is going to lead to hair loss anyway. I actually think that it will lead to a worse hair loss, and here's why. DHT seems to attach itself to what's inflamed, and it seems to reduce cortisol. Thus, we know cortisol spikes when we are working out. Now, when you look at it that way, you can say, well, I can inhibit DHT, but the inflammation is still there. And we know what acute inflammation does. It begins to really, really cause a problem with the organ, Consider if your lungs was always inflamed. Eventually, they will stop working. Therefore, the follicles will eventually stop working if they become inflamed chronically or acutely over time. When DHT begins to suppress inflammation, one of the things that it also does is it seems to bind to the follicle, and it puts the follicle in a comatose position. What does that mean? That means that if it suppresses the follicle, and I'll tell you why it's doing that. When the follicles become inflamed, it sends a message to the body that there is a problem there, and this problem could actually cause greater problems. So the body sends DHT as the special ops of the body's immune system in order to suppress not only just the inflammation, but to also suppress the host, which is who? The follicle. And if the follicle is starved, quarantined by DHT, what happens? It miniaturizes. But when it is miniaturized, the body is happy because now the problem is solved. If the follicle is miniaturized, then whatever is hosted in the body, whether it's a parasite, rather it's a protein like gluten, rather it's dairy, something in the protein in dairy that's causing you to become inflamed. That's why I connect this to the gut a lot of times. You become bald because miniature follicle cannot produce hair. So what you see is DHT is the culprit, it's the problem. What I see is DHT is the special ops that if it did not go and shut down that follicle, once the body's immune system got to it, that's when you get scarring alopecia. And even if the body's immune system doesn't get to it, if the follicle stays chronically inflamed, infected as such, it will eventually stop working permanently. And or if it is hosted by a parasite, by a bacteria, by a fungus, you will have a bigger problem in the bloodstream. So yes, DHT does contribute to hair loss. It's a major contributor. However, it is owed an apology because what happens is it is actually the savior. DHT also helps us to repair when we're working out. DHT gives us our masculine hormones. It's 5 times stronger than testosterone. So it is not the enemy of men. It is actually a beautiful masculine hormone. The problem is if you are inflamed or having internal problems, your testosterone will be switched over to DHT. The body says you don't need to get bigger. You need medication. And DHT acts as kind of like a steroid, kind of like a medication in order to help you with the problem that you don't see. You only see the manifestation of it. DHT is owed an apology. Now, we're going to keep on suppressing it, right? Mainstream. But what we're not saying is why would this steroid need to be so prevalent in the bloodstream? It's because the omen, you have a problem and is attempting to fix it. It is not the real cause of male pattern balding. It is the scapegoat. The real cause of male pattern balding is acute follicle stress that more than likely 70% of the time comes from some sort of gut or immune issue. So in regrowing hair, yes, I've had to suppress DHT. However, I am only suppressing it while I am taking care of the true root cause, which is why my feminine follicles are inflamed. And if they are inflamed, these organs, then what else is inflamed? I have to take care of that too. And it led me back down the path of looking at the gut. So Keep this in mind, fellas. You can inhibit DHT, but what you really want to do is ask yourself, why is special ops in my scalp? So that's my video for today. Hopefully you've listened to something that's helped you to halt hair loss and or restore it. If so, hit the like and subscribe. If not, give another video a chance. I'm pretty sure you will find something interesting. But if I can do it, you all can do it too.